Welcome to the SACNAS webinar on Do I Belong in STEM? Identifying and Succeeding Beyond Impostor Syndrome. My name is Katerina, and I'm honored to serve the SACNAS community as Student Programs Manager. This is our first webinar series that SACNAS staff cannot wait to share with you all. In this series, our goal is to highlight and amplify voices of SACNAS Leadership Institute graduates. Today, I'll be talking to our guests, Anna and Kamuela, who will explore how imposter syndrome, self-doubt, and mental health affected their education and career in STEM. They are also two exemplary, strong human beings who have overcome obstacles that I'm sure many of you can relate to, listen to, and ask them questions. But before we get started, for our first-time attendees, welcome to SACNAS. We are an inclusive organization dedicated to achieving true diversity in STEM, where the field reflects of demographics of our country's population. As the nation's largest multicultural and multidisciplinary STEM diversity organization, SACNAS creates space where all members, partners, and staff feel they belong and can embrace and celebrate their intersectional identities. If you are not yet, we invite you to join SACNAS as a member. You can sign up for free by visiting membership.sacnas.org. And please check the chat. The links should be there. Please know that you may submit your questions via the Q&A feature at any time, and we will answer as many as we can. Remember to always be polite, mindful, and respectful to others with your comments. So now it's my pleasure to introduce two outstanding panelists we have today. I will start with Dr. Kamuela Yong. Kamuela is the first native Hawaiian to earn a PhD in applied mathematics. He is currently an associate professor of mathematics at the University of Hawai'i, West Oahu. Dr. Yong's research interests include mathematical modeling of biological, ecological, and epidemiology systems using diffusion. He is a lifetime member of SACNAS, a graduate of the Linton Kudry SACNAS Leadership Institute, and has previously shared his experiences with imposter syndrome in his article in Over Your Head on SACNAS digital publication STEM Plus Culture Chronicle. Definitely check that out after this webinar, and the link is posted in the chat. Our second guest is Dr. Anna Maria Porras. Anna is currently a Presidential Postdoctoral Fellow at Cornell University, where she studies variations in the human gut microbiome across global populations. Next year, she will start her own lab as an assistant professor in the Department of Biomedical Engineering at the University of Florida. Her lab will build tissue models to study how microbes interact with human tissues to drive disease. Dr. Porras is a member of SACNAS Cornell chapter and has served as a reviewer for research abstracts, travel scholarships, session presentations, ever since she finished her graduate school. Last year, she attended her first SACNAS conference, where I had the pleasure to finally meet her in person, and she had a lot of fun serving as a mentor judge and being part of SACNAS' first postdoc leadership institute. In her free time, she loves to crochet, often her own microbes, dance, travel, bake, swim, read, and above all, eat ice cream. With that said, I want to thank our guests for joining me here today, and I will let them share their journey with you all. Anna, I will start with you.
Hi, everyone. I'm very excited to be with you all here and to talk, to speak here with SACNAS in particular, which for me has been a really important space to overcome imposter syndrome. And so I'm just going to start by telling you a little bit about my story. I won't go into too much detail because I feel like we'll probably just revisit a lot of those details in the questions portion. And before I start, I just want to say, if you're like, oh, I bet these people don't experience imposter syndrome. I experienced imposter syndrome about whether I was the right person to talk about imposter syndrome. So even just whether I, I had the right expertise to talk about this. And so I'm intimately acquainted with what it is to feel like you're an imposter. So I was born in Bucaramanga, Colombia. That's actually where I grew up, where I was raised. Most of my family lives in Colombia. I moved to the United States almost exactly 14 years ago, this August, to study biomedical engineering, because at the time there were very few universities that offered this degree in Colombia. So I arrived at the University of Texas at Austin. So that presented its own sets of challenges of like being an immigrant and just like having no idea what you're doing. And my parents are actually engineering professors, which isn't very common to have both of your parents be engineering professors, and they could help me with some things obviously, but then there were many others that is just a completely different education system. Where what did I tweeted something recently about the experiences of immigrants, and I wish I remember who said this, but someone said, oh, it was my friend Maria Porras. She said that as an international student, she often felt like everyone else had a cheat sheet with all the answers and she had nothing. And that was such a good description of what it maybe felt like for all of you, whether you were an international student or not, to go through college. I very often felt like that. But it ended up being a great experience. I love Texas. One thing that I really, before that, I lived in Germany for a year. And in Germany, like that was like a huge culture shock, going from Latin America to Germany. And like the people aren't as friendly as they are in Colombia or in Texas, actually. And that was a very jarring experience. And so in comparison, when I arrived in Texas, Texas felt like home. First of all, there's like at the University of Texas, I think it's 20 to 22% Latinx. So it's just the faces I would see every day, the people I would talk to. You hear people speak Spanish. So it's not a perfect place, but it's a place where like I personally felt very much at home. So then I graduated, started doing research at Texas. And then I'll come back around to that at the very end. And then I moved to the University of Wisconsin-Madison for my PhD. I also got a master's along the way, also in biomedical engineering. And that was a way different experience, because I moved from Texas to Wisconsin. So not only was the weather an issue, but then also I went from a university that had like 20% Latinx to a university that's definitely the majority is white. And so that presented its own different set of challenges. I genuinely think that was like when I really started to begin to understand what it was like to grow up as Latinx or Native American or Black, as any type of underrepresented group in the United States. Before that, I'm not sure that that was clear to me at all, like the kinds of challenges that that poses. So yeah, so Wisconsin, it was a little rough at the beginning, but then I found my community. It was a lot of people, a lot of my friends were from Puerto Rico, Chile, and Colombia. And so we established a really strong community of friends. My friends within the program of all backgrounds also really helped in overcoming a lot of these feelings. I think every PhD student has the same idea that like, oh my gosh, they're gonna find out I'm not supposed to be here. They're gonna kick me out. I'm not good enough. I think those are all things that most students feel, and I definitely like include myself in it. My mentor at graduate school, she's fantastic. I consider her my friend. She's amazing. And I still say to this day that like she believes in me way more than I believe in myself. And so it was for my experience as a PhD student, honestly, often you'll hear some PhD students talk about how grad school was really hard, and it was still a little hard, but I think because I had Kristen, my experience was overall for me was really positive. And I think it's because I had such a good mentor. So then it came time to graduate, and I was looking, I knew I wanted to be a professor. So I knew in my field, if you want to be a professor, you have to do a postdoc. And here's a funny thing. Sometimes when we're scientists and engineers, we think that to become a professor, like you have to love being in the lab. Like that's the only way to be a scientist. Like you have to love doing the experiments and being in the lab. Here's the thing about me. I actually don't like being in the lab that much. So I wasn't super thrilled about having to do a postdoc, because I was like, I just want to jump to the part where you write and like mentor students and teach and like propose ideas. I don't really want to do the day-to-day experiments. You have to do it because it's just the way the world currently works. So then I ended up at Cornell through networking essentially, but I ended up switching fields because I wanted to work in more like global health related topics. And in what I worked on before, which is tissue engineering, we don't really do global health type things. So I ended up switching fields to what Katarina said, to microbiomes. And so that, like, honestly, in this postdoc, plus then I moved to an Ivy League school, an even wider community and institution. And so that was really hard for me. So like this postdoc has been probably the roughest experience of my life. And that's when I really started encountering imposter syndrome, to a point that like the imposter syndrome was stopping me from like achieving anything. And so, and like, in a way, so I can understand a little bit why I felt that, right? I was like a biomedical engineer who had zero experience in microbiology, yet I'm supposed to now be like doing this research on the microbiome, and I'm at the postdoc level where you're supposed to know more, but like I didn't even know things that undergrads knew, right, about microbiology. So I think that was part of it. Then, as I said before, that I moved to increasingly predominantly white spaces. I think that was also part of it. And like my imposter syndrome and anxiety really hit a peak about 2 years into my postdoc, maybe a year and a half. And I remember one of my dear friends told me something really good that had happened to him. And I was super excited for him. And then like within 10 seconds, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, like this just happened to him. I'm never going to be a professor. Like I'm not good enough. I'm never going to achieve that. This is never going to, and I knew that reaction was not like that. It was normal in the sense that a lot of people feel it, but I knew that I wasn't supposed to feel that anxious to that extent, that like I needed help to overcome those feelings. And so, and I had been thinking, because I remember like I didn't suffer that much through grad school compared to what I was experiencing. So then that's when I was like, I need help. And so I started going to a therapist from the faculty and staff assistance program here at Cornell. Thankfully, my therapist, she's from Puerto Rico. So, because I know some people struggle with that when they go to therapy, is finding the right therapist for them. So this therapist was from Puerto Rico. She had actually also been a postdoc or a grad student here at Cornell. So she intimately understood what my experience was like. And I remember like I cried so much in our first meeting, but I was just so relieved when she was like, yes, what you are experiencing is extreme anxiety and we do need to treat it. Like, and she was like, it is like, you shouldn't have to suffer so much, yet I also want you to know that this is really common for women of color at these types of institutions. So it was both like, this is a problem and we're gonna address it, but also it is normal that you're experiencing this given the external circumstances. So both of those things really helped me. We can talk later, I'm sure it'll come up in the questions, about specific strategies that Martha, my therapist, has given me to deal with this anxiety. And then we also figured out that my imposter syndrome and anxiety was deeply connected to my worries about being on the faculty job market and not being good enough and feeling like I was an imposter and etc. And so we did a lot of work leading up to me actually going on the market in all of 2019. And it's, I mean, I still suffer through it. But then I went on the job market. I had a lot of anxiety over it. I remember there was one day that I vividly remember I had to stop working on my research statement because I told myself, I think I'm about to have a panic attack. I've never had a panic attack, but I'm pretty sure I'm about to have a panic attack. And then that's when I was like, okay, if I feel that stress, I need to walk away from it for a few minutes. I think I ended up taking the rest of the day off. So there was a lot of anxiety to that. And then funnily enough, once I actually started interviewing, it like wasn't that bad. And as Katarina said, I ended up being able to find a job, and I'll start my faculty position at Florida next year. And actually the application process did a lot to help me counteract my feelings of being an imposter. At the same time, I'm already worried about like becoming a faculty member and already feeling like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, why didn't anyone give me a job in this? So yeah, so I'll leave it at that for now. And that's a little bit of like my experience with this particular topic.
I'm sure we'll definitely come back with many questions for specific details that you shared with your story. Kamuela, would like to hear from you.
Yeah, so I'm from Hawaii. I'm a native Hawaiian or indigenous Hawaiian. And when I went to my undergrad, it was at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles. So I went there. I really loved math, but I didn't know what to do with math. So I started engineering, civil engineering. And I was taking so many math classes, I figured a couple more, I'd get a math minor. I took a couple more. After that, I might as well just get a second degree. So I got 2 degrees, one in applied math and one in civil engineering. And I had a really wonderful mentor, both in engineering and in math. And my math mentor had showed me what it was to be an applied mathematician. Because at the time I had no idea. I was majoring in math, but I didn't know what you could do with applied math. And she showed me, like, you can do all these wonderful math models. And so she encouraged me to apply to graduate school in civil engineering. I wanted to do all these engineering models through mathematical tools. But she also encouraged me to apply to one math program. And I applied to that program and I really liked it. And it turns out that was the University of Iowa. So I went to Iowa. It's not as extreme as change from Hawaii to California to Iowa as Anna has, going all the way to Wisconsin. But it was still a very big change for me. And every time I had to show my ID anywhere in Iowa and they saw Hawaii, I always got the question, Hawaii, what are you doing here? But I went to Iowa, and one of the reasons why I chose Iowa was that I had a chance to visit the program. I talked to students. Even if you don't get to visit, if you can talk to students to get a feel of how the program was, because I really felt that was a program that was nurturing and encouraging for me. The students weren't going to be competitive, and for me, it worked. I wanted to have an environment where my classmates worked with me and not against me and competed against me. But so I started to go to University of Iowa, and I figured I got 2 degrees. I got math and engineering undergraduate degree. I can handle graduate program. I started off the graduate program, and a month into it, it was just so overwhelming. I was getting my butt kicked, and I could not handle it. I called my advisor, or my undergraduate mentor, up, Erica Camacho, and I talked to her for hours one night, and just hours, and she helped convince me that no, it's not that bad, but I still felt like I didn't belong there, that the University of Iowa only accepted me because they wanted to have a native Hawaiian on their list to just say, look at this, we have, as you may remember, I'm the first native Hawaiian ever to get a PhD in applied math. And so I thought maybe they just wanted to have me just for bragging rights, and that they didn't really accept me on merit. And it felt a little bit better talking to my mentor, but I still wasn't convinced that I fully belonged there. I looked and I saw these students in my class that were asking these really brilliant questions, and they're so brilliant. I didn't even know what the questions that they were asking. It was just like, so I didn't ask any questions because I didn't want to look stupid in front of everybody else. But then one day I talked to someone that was a year ahead of me, and she told me, she said, dude, it's okay. Like, we all feel this way. Everyone in the class feels this way. There's a reason why the person to your left is not asking questions, because they're looking at you. And if you're not asking questions, they think, wow, he really knows what he's doing. He's not asking any questions. He understands this. Person, in front of me, they're not asking questions, but then they're looking at me and they say, wow, this guy's not asking questions. He really understands it. And when you realize that the whole class is looking at that and saying, wow, really, everyone doesn't understand, but you don't want to look like the only person in the classroom. It was the big changer for me. It really changed how I perceive things. That, okay, yeah, we really don't know. Yeah, maybe there's one person that's asking a lot of questions that might be really intelligent sounding. And sometimes, yeah, they might know what they're doing. You don't know the background that they come from. Maybe they had taken that course before. Maybe they just had a different experience. Or now that I'm a professor, maybe those intelligent questions really aren't that intelligent after all. They just put in a bunch of big words in it and it sounds smart, but the questions that they're asking just really aren't that smart. And so, but as a student, you don't really know that that's the case. You just know someone's asking questions and you can't even understand what the question is. And so I didn't want to say, whoa, hang on, I don't understand what you're asking. How am I supposed to understand the answer? So it was for me, it was that revelation, because I was so close to dropping out my first year, and just after, a month or two, feeling like I didn't belong there, that they accidentally put me in, or they just put me in for bragging rights. But once I had that revelation, I realized, okay, I do belong here. Everyone else is also struggling, but you just don't want to admit it in front of the whole class. But I found a really close friend that I could confide in fact, two really close friends, and then we worked together, we studied together, and it was really comforting to have someone to just say, I'm so lost, and for that someone to say, me too. So it really helped to have that, and I got better. But I managed my first year. Then I took qualifying exams after my first year, and you need to take 3 tests and get a certain level of passing to go on for your PhD. And I missed one of the tests by just 1 score, and I had to retake it. And if I didn't pass it the second time, then I was out of the program. And so it was another big setback. But at this point, I had already been experienced knowing that, like, if I don't know what to do, I can ask for help. And so it was a big setback, because I thought, I knew, but I just missed it by a little bit. And so I asked for help. I had a professor even come to me and say, look, I know you didn't pass this one. If you need help, come see me. I talked to friends. People gave me their study materials, and I studied. And then the next time I took it, I passed it. So it was a lot better. And then things started to look up for me. After I passed that the second time, then I was the first in my cohort to propose a thesis. I was the first in my cohort to schedule my thesis defense, and the first to get a job outside of the university. So things really did look up for me afterwards. But, I wouldn't have gotten that had I, at that first month, second month, where I said, I'm so lost. I don't belong here. They put me in only because they wanted to brag about me. And if I had dropped out at that point, I would never have had the success and been where I'm at right now. So after graduating at the University of Iowa, I worked at Arizona State as a postdoc for 3 years before coming home to Hawaii, which is really great to be able to come back home at the University of Hawaii, West Oahu. And I just made tenure just this summer. So again, things are really looking up for me.
Wow, that's amazing. And congratulations on your tenure. Thank you for sharing, both of you, opening it up and sharing your insights. I have a question. Maybe Anna answered this question already, but please feel free to add more. What's an indicator you are suffering from imposter syndrome? How did you know that it was imposter syndrome? And what are effective exercises to snap out of it once you have ID'd it?
Yeah, I think, okay, maybe we can start, because I noticed there was a question that was like, can you define imposter syndrome? And I think Kamuela just described it very perfectly in his story. It's like when you have this feeling of like, I don't belong here, somebody is gonna come and they're gonna figure out that I'm not that smart and that I've been fooling everyone, and they're gonna kick me out. So it's like, it's not just when you feel that, but more or less when you feel that. Before I forget, I put it in the chat, but I just started listening to a book on imposter syndrome that's called The Secret Thoughts of Successful Women, and it's about imposter syndrome for women, but it also applies to men. And so I started listening to it. That has a much longer, more complete definition of what it is. And imposter syndrome, it's also important to know that it affects everyone. It's just that, as Kamuela was saying, some people talk about it and other people don't talk about it. And some people are more susceptible to it because of external circumstances that are outside of our control. And so, like, I noticed I'm experiencing imposter syndrome. So for me, my imposter syndrome manifests itself in extreme anxiety. And extreme anxiety that doesn't let me begin tasks. So that's just the way my anxiety works. So I notice I'm experiencing when I start having these like spiraling thoughts that are like, oh, I've been asked for this opportunity. So like I said at the beginning, so for example, oh, Katarina just emailed me. She asked if I could talk about imposter syndrome. And at first I'm like, yes. And then I'm like, but wait, no. Like, who am I to talk about imposter syndrome? I know nothing. Why aren't they interviewing? Like, why didn't she ask like a person who has way more experience? Like, I have to start asking myself all these like questions that are, and they progressively get more and more and more ridiculous, because that's, again, how my anxiety works. Like with the job market, it was like to the extent that it would be like, I'm never gonna find a job in any profession, like not even just as faculty, but like anywhere. So when I notice, and I can notice these thoughts because we've done the exercise with my therapist of identifying them, writing them down. So now that process is much faster for me now than it used to be. So I can recognize really quickly when I am spiraling. And so what works for me, because there's multiple ways to tackle imposter syndrome. I'm sure once I finish listening to this book, I'll have more tools. But what has worked for me with my therapist is, she's like, I'm an engineer, right? I'm a scientist. Like, I'm all about facts. So sometimes I just put it down on paper and I write down what is true, like objectively, what is true and what is false. Like, what evidence do I have for each of these ideas in my head? So for example, when I talked about me being insecure about being a microbiologist, right? Or like studying microbiomes, it would be like, I'm not a microbiologist. Is that objectively true? That is objectively true. I am not a microbiologist. Okay, moving on. Let's move on to the next thought. Like, I will never, like, I'll never learn anything. And it'll be like, is that true? And it's like, no, actually, you've learned a lot of stuff in your life. You finished a PhD. So there's like, I a lot of the times have to come back to the evidence. And so, and like break it down like that to convince myself that I can do it. And then the third thing that has also helped me is gathering evidence, but not about myself, but about the world we live in, right? So, for example, there's a paper I read that was published in April in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences that is called the diversity paradox. And so this talks about how those of us who are underrepresented in our fields, be it on the dimension of gender or race, that we actually, this paper proves that we just have more innovative ideas. Like, our ideas are crazier, but they do not get adopted at the same rate as people who belong to the majority. And so then if I know that, then I can separate the things that happen to me from the causes of them, right? Or for example, as an international student, I was not eligible for fellowships. I just wasn't, because if you're undocumented, you're also not eligible for fellowships, right? So I could interpret it as, oh, the few times I'm applying for fellowships, I never win anything. I am the worst. I just never win anything. Or you could know that, and you could be like, okay, the few times I've applied, I haven't gotten anything, but also I just don't get as many opportunities to do these things as other people. So I think the other thing that helps me is separating me intrinsically at what I can do from like the external circumstances that make it so. The woman, I'm forgetting her name, that wrote that book, she just said in the part I listened to today that sometimes you can look at the circumstances and you can be like, you know, it is almost expected that you would feel this way because of the external circumstances. So those are just some of the things that work for me.
Yeah, I want to chime in too. I think, you know, just recognizing imposter syndrome, you don't really recognize it. It's just when you feel you don't belong. And it's hard to say, well, hard to know, do I not belong because I don't belong, or am I feeling I don't belong because of the imposter syndrome? And, you know, it really is, you know, in my opinion, if you like what you're doing, if you like being there, then you belong. I think it's a matter of, you know, if you really truly believe that, then you actually belong there. And, you know, there will be ways to make sure that you're up to date. For example, like as I shared, for me, it was being able to have someone to confide in, to say, you know, I'm lost, and someone to tell me, you know, be it a friend, be it a counselor or somebody. Even today, even as successful as I am in my career, when I go to conferences and I sit in talks, I get so lost, and I think, wow, you know, I really don't know what's going on in this research. I'm not that good of a researcher. And I can't remember where I got it from, but someone had said when they feel the imposter syndrome, especially at talks, what they started to do was they wrote down questions, questions that they had, and they didn't ask it. It was just for them to have that. These are my questions. And then slowly people started asking those questions. People that were, you know, that she felt belonged there. started asking her questions. So if the people that do belong there are asking the exact same questions as me, they're not dumb questions. They're actually legitimate questions that people should ask. And after several conferences and several seminars and whatnot, she realized, okay, you know what, it's my turn, so I'm going to start asking questions. And so she wrote down the questions, but also asked those questions. And that was one way of this person overcoming in seminars. And yeah, I still get imposter syndrome every time, when I go to conferences, when I'm around people, I get very intimidated that, yeah, my research is not as up to date as theirs, or my, whatever it is, there's always going to be some feeling. But recognizing that, yeah, no, I do belong at this conference, even though, your research may seem better than mine, I still belong in this conference. There's a reason, why I'm here, and I'm here because I am a successful academic, or I'm a successful, whatever you are, and you do belong there.
Thank you. I hear the commonalities from you two, how to deal the exercise to snap out of it. You basically self-teach yourself and tell yourself. I think it's very important, especially for our students who are early in their education, to hear from people like you, that you, even today, how successful you are, you still experience imposter syndrome. It doesn't go away. You just learn how to deal with it and live with it. How do you stay confident in a room full of experts?
Again, like, just staying confident in a room full of experts, you have to realize that to have gotten to their level, everyone has to have learned something. And we as scientists, we're always learning, and the only way to move up is by learning and having an open mind. And if you aren't at that level, like, if you can get at that level, and you can keep learning, and you can keep just exploring the world, and we're curious. That's why we're scientists, right? We want to keep learning. And so I think the thing is just remembering that they didn't just wake up in the morning and become world-class experts in those fields. They started off as a student, like many of you that are out there right now. And to get to where you were, you just keep asking questions. You keep, asking questions to yourself, searching for the answers, asking questions to peers and mentors, and even asking questions to people that are highly influential. For me, I remember the first time I was next to someone really influential, I really wanted to approach them, but I didn't know how to approach them. So I kind of just lingered next to them until they turned, and then they were in a group, and I was kind of in the vicinity, and then they said something, and then they looked, and then that's how I started to talk to them. But to gain my confidence, it was hard to just strike up a conversation. And so getting in that vicinity to then open up a conversation really helped. Feeling that I belonged, again, it took a long time, but realizing these people didn't just wake up as a distinguished scientist. They climbed the ladder, and this is what I got to do to climb the ladder. I'm learning from them. And just like in the classroom, when you realize, yeah, I need to get to where I'm at. I don't understand, but there's a way I can do this. I can ask for help. I can ask my TA. I can ask my professor. I can ask my friends. I can ask someone that's a year ahead. Just like when you're in a room, you ask a colleague, a scientist that's a couple years ahead of you. They might be able to have more advice, and so that you don't have to look to the very top of the list. You can just look at slightly above you, and then someone that you might be more approachable. But it's the network. It's talking to people, really finding out their stories, getting to know them, realizing that they're not a deity. They're just the person, and he or she has flaws just like you do.
Yeah, I echo absolutely everything that was just said. I think it's really important, like I noticed Margie just said it too, that we like normalize these conversations about imposter syndrome, because I think once you realize that other people experience it too, and that other people had to go through similar struggles to what you did, it helps. This question, like, it's really close to me. That's why I wasn't answering right away, because that's basically what I had to get over as I was going around interviewing at places, right? Like, like chalk talks. I still get nervous just thinking about having to do a chalk talk. Because it's like a room full of all your future colleagues. And I felt like I was like, I don't know, these are just these like random ideas I have. I don't know if they're good or bad. And so for me, there were two strategies that really worked in that context, where it's like me standing as the very much junior person, exposing my ideas in front of a room full of only faculty. And so for me, it was one, really believing in my ideas. So it was like, I am really passionate about what I study. And so I think it's really important to be into what you do. Not that you have to know what that is right now in like as a student, but for example, if you're presenting a project, if you're really proud of the work that you did for that project or for that presentation, then you can kind of just concentrate on that. Like, I really believe in what I did. This is really interesting stuff. I'm just going to talk about that and kind of cloud all the other stuff out. And then the other thing is, and I do this for every presentation, is I identify if it's a person I know, even better, but sometimes it's not. But like, I identify, oh, the person that's always smiling and like encouraging me, then I'm just like, okay, anytime I feel nervous, I'm going to go back to that person and like remember that like at least this 1% is really nice. And so that helps too. And then the other thing that really helps is practice. And so here's where I'm going to plug going to SACNAS. Because if you go to SACNAS, everyone at SACNAS is really nice. Even people that you think, oh my gosh, they're like Kamuela, right? Like the first native Hawaiian to get a PhD in applied math. And he's right here with us chatting. That's what it's like at the conference. So there you can practice talking to an audience of experts that is friendlier than maybe what you were encounter at a regular conference. So for me, that has also been important, to find like spaces that are more comfortable and more inclusive, where I don't have to be as scared to make mistakes.
Great, thank you, Anna. Yeah, it does sound like you just need to be confident in yourself and keep going with that. It's interesting that you say it's nice to identify that one person who was nice in the room and keep going back there. And I agree with you. And it's a luck when you have that person. It's a challenge when you don't have anyone, right? Our next question is, it often happens to us and anxiety kicks in. Insecurities may originate from comparing ourselves to others. What advice do you have to avoid doing that? And just like, for instance, with Anna, yeah, you share with your friend who, dear friend to you, shared the news and you were comparing yourself.
Yeah, I personally really struggle with this still. A lot. But I have to I think what I have to remember is that I was just giving a talk earlier today on like what it's like to go in the faculty job market, and you'll notice, like, choose whatever profession, like if it's being a faculty member or whatever, and you notice there are as many different ways to get there as there are people in that position. And so sometimes I just have to remind myself that like everyone has a unique path, everyone has their own strengths, and like, yeah, I still catch myself comparing myself to others. I just try to remember that, like, again, it's like they're on their journey, I'm on my journey. And yeah, I don't know, this one is particularly hard for me, so maybe I'm not the best person to give advice.
Yeah, so I'm still always comparing myself to others, and you know, you think about it, like like I look at colleagues and I compare myself to my colleagues. I go to conferences, I compare my talk to someone else's talk. I compare, you know, what I've done in my career to what someone else has done in their career. It's always that way, but I can look back too. I'm looking back and I see, well, this student compared to me is like so much more advanced, so better, and you're always going to compare yourself to others, but thinking about, yeah, it's fine to compare yourself to others because you see what's out there, but know that you're there for a reason. So back when, again, when I was thinking I was the token Hawaiian, and no one actually explicitly said that to me, I just felt that way. I felt, I don't even belong here, and I had to rationalize internally why I didn't belong, and that was because they wanted to have someone like me. I know there are places where people do explicitly say that to you, but at that time for me, it was my own way of rationalizing why, there's some reason why I don't belong, and then that was my rationalizing it. But yeah, you compare yourself to others, but it's okay to do that, but still remember, like, yeah, wow, like this person, she did so well on this test, or his research is so advanced, and that's okay. But you just think, well, maybe I can do that. Maybe if I did this, or yeah, you know what? Maybe my test scores will never be that good, but there'll be something else I can do. Maybe when I start my research, the research program will be good. Or when you say like, well, maybe after I finish this chapter of my thesis, the next chapter that I start is going to be a really awesome thing. And so you can compare yourself, but still realize that there's other things that you can do to excel in different ways. And even if you're hearing things that like from your PI or from your advisor, like one, I think it's really good to have a mentor that's not your PI or your advisor. To have maybe it's great to have a great relationship with your advisor and PI, but your mentor should be two different people. Your mentor should be someone that you can go to regardless of what's going on. And so if you have a problem with your advisor and they're your mentor, you can't go to your mentor and get help. So to be able to have someone to go to help with when you need to talk about your advisor, and there's always going to be a point in your career that you're going to have problems with your advisor. If your advisor is saying that you need to do this faster, or you need to re-examine your results, whatever it is, to much harsher serious problems about racism and sexism, or even harassment, you need to have a mentor that you can trust, that's not your advisor, someone that you can talk to. But when you go to them, they'll also remind you, like, you're here for a reason. I'm your mentor because I know that you're going to succeed. You're the graduate program or job or even undergraduate, you're accepted there because they want you to succeed. Iowa didn't accept me because they thought I was going to fail, because it looks worse for them to have said, oh yeah, so we started off with this cohort with 25 students and we only ended up with 24 students graduating. Well, what happened to that one student? Oh yeah, he was a Hawaiian. He would have been the first, but he didn't succeed. That would have looked really bad. They accepted me because they knew that even if I didn't know, but they knew that I was going to succeed. My mentor in undergrad knew something about me that I didn't know. She knew I could get a PhD. I didn't know I could get a PhD. She really talked me into it. It's people see things in you that you don't see, and you're going to have advocates that you don't realize. And that's where there's just so many people behind you advocating for you, from friends, family, classmates, teachers. They're there for you. There's always going to be someone there for you.
Great, thank you. You actually touch on the next question, and I know both of you mentioned this already, but I want you to share more details, examples. Who do you have in your support system?
I have, sorry, Kamala, did you want to go? A lot of people. So I mentioned before, well, there are my parents, and I'm super lucky because in my case, my parents can both they're like my parents, but they also have some experience in academia, so they can also in a way act as my mentors. But in general, I rely on my family and friends a ton. Then there are my mentors, and my mentors aren't always the same thing as my advisors, because not everyone has an advisor who can be a great mentor. Because I saw someone also ask, like, how can you engage your advisors in conversations of imposter syndrome? And like, the truth is, some advisors, unfortunately, and I've experienced this myself, are not open to having this conversation. And so when that's the case, you can go somewhere else. So my mentor, I mentioned my grad school mentor, she's probably the person I turn to the most when I don't know what I'm doing, or when I'm like, I was asked to do this, am I like an expert? Like, you know, like, do you think I'm qualified to do it? And so she's a very, very important person in my academic life. I also have a lot of friends, both so within my field of biomedical engineering, but also I've created a lot of support networks of people who share very similar experiences to mine. And I think I know a lot of the people in the audience probably belong to groups that have been historically minoritized. And I think it's really important to have people in your network that have experienced similar things. So for example, when I was going on the job market, I asked of advice from a Black woman, a friend I made through Twitter. We're not friends in real life, but originally through Twitter. And she had just gone on the market, and she told me advice and things that nobody else had told me before that ended up being really helpful for me in the job market. But guess what? Because the other people I had talked to before were mostly white women. And so they just had never even encountered some of the issues I encountered while I went on the job market. So that for me has been important. And then the last year, so Katarina mentioned that I was part of the first class of the SACNAS Postdoc Leadership Institute. Those 2 days were really, like, professionally and personally, were really important for me. And I'm still in touch with multiple of the other postdocs and grad students that were part of that institute. So you can also find your support community and at societies like SACNAS, or we have a group in biomedical engineering called Latinx in BME. And so that group has also been really important for me in, because sometimes, right, when you don't know if you're the imposter or if you did something wrong, you just need someone, you just need to ask, hey, this happened to me. Is it me? Like, is it me, or did I actually experience something weird? And so stuff like that, yeah, so a bunch of different types of networks.
Okay, yeah, so my network, I mean, there's always someone trying to support you. So, you know, my family and my community back home were always there supporting me. You know, I had people send me care packages when I was in Iowa, just to have a little taste of home. For those of you that went to SACNAS last year when I was in Hawaii, you know, we have a unique food here. And so there's just stuff treats from home that helped remind me that, you know, people care about me, people want me to succeed. But you know, I then in school I had classmates from undergraduate. I had my really close knit of study friends that we did homework together, we goofed off together, we had the most fun, and it made school bearable. Graduate school, same thing. I had a really close knit of friends that, you know, we would go to the coffee shop and we'd study, but then we would also go and play tennis together, or we would you know, watch TV at someone's house, or we would cook together. My mentors, you know, one of my mentors, she gave me her phone, her cell phone. We talked for a long time. My advisors were there. I had some faculty in grad school that were very supportive of me, but you know, mentorship or support, it comes in different forms. Like I had two advisors because my thesis was at the intersection of math models and ecology. So I had a math advisor and an ecology advisor, and my relationship with both of those were very different. One of them we were on a first name basis, and one of them I always called him Professor, and one of them, the one first name basis, we had coffee once a week and we would talk about updates. I've gone to his house, I house sat for him, he knew my wife. You know, it was a much more relaxed environment. But then my other professor, you know, we were, you know, it was a very more formal, but he really cared about me and he really cared about my success. And I saw other people, they had, you know, again, they were like first name basis with their advisor. And I thought, oh, I wish I had this relation, but, you know, I had an advisor that did care about me and that did do everything he could do to ensure my success. And that was the main thing. That was the main thing is, you know, am I going to succeed? And but it was nice for me to have those two comparisons to show that, yeah, just because my friends have someone that they're on a first name basis and they go to coffee with their advisor, they, you know, they go to dinner with their advisor and their families, and, you know, and one of my advisors, that's not my relationship. That doesn't mean that he's not supportive of me. You know, he's very supportive of me, but it's a very formal support. But the main thing is that it's a support. And at first I didn't recognize that as support. I just thought, you know, I always called him professor or doctor, and, you know, we just met in his office and we never met anywhere else. But he was there for me. And that was the thing, is that, you know, it didn't really matter as long as he was a good advisor. If you don't have a good advisor, I would highly recommend switching your advisor, because it might set you back another year, but one more year in a place that you love versus a year in a hostile environment, or versus a little bit time in a hostile environment, is a big difference for your mental health, for your sanity, just for the joy of life. An extra year in a place that you're having fun in is not that bad. So if you don't have an advisor that's really caring about you, that, you know, demeans you, embarrasses you, that's not the place you want to be. You want to be in a place that's more welcoming. If you have and I saw in the questions, you know, if you have an advisor that complements your work, you know, that's great. You know, you want to have someone that really praises what you're doing, that thinks that you belong there. If they're recognizing your work, especially in front of other people, as, you know, something amazing, that's the person that you know you want to do, that continues to say, this person is doing great things. You know, maybe you're not doing great things on their level, but again, you're a student, you're learning, as you move up through the process, and, you know, those things do help you. You know, you might not feel like you belong, but then you have someone that's supportive of you, that says you belong there, that says you're doing exactly what you need to do. You know, that's helping you with the imposter syndrome, just to know if someone believes that I'm doing good, then that's great. And then now, you know, as I started to go to conferences, I met other students in the same stage of my career. I met people that were ahead of me, even people that were below me, where I started to mentor them. But then it kind of gave me a sense of responsibility. When you start to mentor someone, and you meet someone, you share your experience, and they look up to you, you think, wow, like, you know, I got this far, I can go even further, and think about who are all the other people I can talk to, I can mentor, like what I'm doing right now. And so, you know, some of you are experiencing being mentors for the first time. People are approaching you, people are emailing you, people see you and they want to talk to you. And that's the beautiful thing, is that the more you go out there, the more your network grows. Going to conferences, going to talks, meeting visitors, these are all things that are great opportunities to grow your network, but to also grow networks for other people.
Thank you, Kamala. Yeah, you hear from our guests their stories and see how important it is to have support system, and how important it is to have those cheerleaders in your life. And if you do experience imposter syndrome, try not to isolate yourself, and try to open up, and you will find people who share exactly what you are sharing, and it will be more bearable to keep going. The time is passing quickly. We are about close to an hour, so I will have one or two questions, and you were leading into this already. how do you juggle your own imposter syndrome while helping students through theirs?
So I mean, for me, I'm still constantly juggling my own imposter syndrome. I don't know if it's ever going to fully go away, but when I recognize that I'm starting to fall under that mentality, I don't belong here, you know, I quickly realize, no, I do belong here. I'm at this conference for a reason. I got accepted into grad school for a reason. You know, I'm in this major and I'm still like, you know, I'm still haven't dropped out yet. I'm still a junior, and you know, I'm passing my courses, or I'm a professor still, and I belong here. So when you recognize that you're there for a reason, someone had to have looked at you, had to have looked at your record, looked at what you've done and said, yeah, this person, he or she belongs here. Let's accept them. Let's accept this paper. Let's approve this grant. Let's you know, whatever it is, let me accept this person into my lab. You know, whatever it is, you recognize if you belong there, then that helps you understand your imposter syndrome. And then when you start mentoring others people and you're trying to get them to do the same thing, it might actually be a good thing, because then you can share your own experience with them and say, look, I feel this way too. And I'm not trying to tell you I still feel imposter syndrome, which means, you know, like you're going to have to dread an imposter syndrome for the rest of your life. But this is how, when I see it, you know, recognizing it and then being able to address it. And students may have a hard time approaching you, or you might have a hard time approaching an advisor to talk about imposter syndrome, and it's all right, you know. But eventually, if you feel, you know, the courage to talk to someone, maybe first, before even approaching an advisor, just talking to a friend, building up that confidence on being vulnerable, because saying that you don't belong there is a very vulnerable thing. Saying, you know, even now, like, this is probably the first time I've said it to, like, you know, a large enough audience that, you know, even I, as a professor, sometimes feel I don't belong. So, you know, it's really tough to be open and vulnerable like that. So if you build up your experience being vulnerable by telling your friends, you can tell an advisor. Then when you're the advisor, you can have students that open up to you and talk to you about that imposter syndrome. Sometimes if you're the advisor, maybe just openly sharing it, that way it allows for that dialogue, for them to even approach you, because then it's hard for them to approach you. You're an advisor, you know, you're a mentor, you're a year ahead of them. You're the one that they look up to, and they don't want to let you down by saying that they don't belong. So if you can start that dialogue by saying, you know, I was in your shoes and I felt so lost, that might be a good way to start.
That was a great answer. I have nothing to add beyond that.
And it's very true. It's again, and the purpose even of today's webinar is to hear stories from you, because it's so important to open up and tell the students, I know where you are now. I was there before, and it's okay. And that's why maybe I'm tough on you and strict with you now, but because I care and I understand and I can relate to you. Thank you. The hour has passed. Thank you, Anna and Kamuela, for taking the time to share your stories, and all attendees for your engagement and insightful discussion. The chat and Q&A section has been, I see all the questions that come up from all the attendees. I hope you all enjoyed today's webinar. Let me share my screen and show you the upcoming webinars. You can always find upcoming and previous webinars on our website, and it will be posted in the chat. Many good topics are coming up, so make sure you follow SACNAS on social media and register for these webinars. And as Anna and Kamuela already mentioned about SACNA's conference, just a few days ago, we have announced that 2020 SACNA's National Diversity in STEM Conference will be virtual this year. And we invite you all to join. It will include online keynote speakers, mentoring and networking opportunities, a graduate school and career expo hall, and beautiful cultural celebrations. That's where SACNAS is a unique organization and conference. We definitely make sure we celebrate our cultural sites. And I hope to see you all there. And this concludes our webinar, and we will see you next time. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Kamala and Anna.